Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you. In that case, we can get started. So the theme of today's workshop is incentive and power analysis. In essence, the way it's going to work, this is the outline of the workshop. We will start by explaining what incentives are in general. Then I will give you 3 questions for incentive analysis. In essence, this is going to be a template that you can use during prep or during debates to characterize actors and characterize their incentives. After that, I will introduce you to a political science / sociological concept called 3 phases of power, which will help you analyze what type of power actors in debate have and to what extent they have it. And I've prepared 2 drills at the end for you to practice your mastery of incentive analysis and of power analysis. So let's get started. What are incentives? An incentive, so the definition I've provided here, an incentive is something which pushes an actor towards an action or a reason or motivation for undertaking an action. An example being, I want to get good at debating, so have an incentive to practice my speeches. So in essence, incentives are related to situations where you have a certain goal. There is something that you want to achieve. There is something that's your interest. In that sense, you have an incentive to follow that goal. And you also have an incentive to do things which are going to bring you closer to that goal. So incentives are in essence tied to interest factors. Actors always have incentives to pursue what is in their interest and to do the things which lead them to that goal. What's important to keep in mind is not just that actors have incentives, but that they have different capacities to fulfill their interest. In other words, different degrees of power. That's why I've called this workshop incentive and power analysis. Insofar as an actor may want something, something can be in the incentive of a particular actor. This doesn't, however, mean that the actor has the capacity or has the power to fulfill their incentive. This is something you're very often going to hear in IR debates, for example. I'm sure that, Croatia has an incentive to be a powerful country within the European Union. We, however, have very little political power, so we are unlikely to be able to fulfill that incentive. So without proving both sides of the coin, which is both incentives and power, it is unlikely that you're going to have a completely plausible characterization of an actor. So what I'm going to try and do now is provide you with 3 questions for incentive analysis that you can ask yourselves about any actor, which will help you provide yourself with a full picture of that actor. I'm going to show the whole slide immediately, but I'm going to lead you step by step through each and every one of them. Question number 1. What does the actor want? And this is the simplest of the questions, right? So in essence, what are the interests of the actor? What is something that the actor desires? So the examples I gave here is parents want the best for their children, political parties want to win elections. Keep in mind that even when there's a motion about something specific, so a particularly specific country, for example, or an international organization, even if you don't know too much about that actor in particular, you can always draw general assumptions, right? So any country wants to be independent, they want to have more trade and power. Any corporation wants to have more profit and more consumers. Any human being wants to be loved, have money, be happy. Like there are general incentives, general assumptions we can draw about any actors, because in general, they are a state, they are a corporation, they are a person, even if we do not know too much about that actor in particular. So even when you find yourself in situations that you are not necessarily familiar with a very specific actor, you can always defer to general assumptions. But the first question is, let's identify what the actor wants. So notably, most often you interact with this question when you have a this house as X motion. So this house, as Iran would stop funding paramilitary groups in the Middle East, for example, that's when the first question in prep is, okay, so what does Iran want? Because the motion asks us to put ourselves in the position of Iran. So the trick is to just assume this position in every motion, be it an actor motion or not. Ask yourself what the stakeholders within that motion desire. Question number 2, and I put 3 questions in here, but they are just different ways to ask the same question depending on the situation. One may be more helpful than the other. So how far is an actor willing to go to get it, and what are they not willing to do? So what is their red line? What are they willing to sacrifice? What does this mean? This means in essence that every actor, when they are following an incentive, they have certain red lines that they're not going to cross. In terms of, there are always things that people are not willing to sacrifice for anything else. So 2 examples I gave here, one is in a positive, one is in a negative sense. So for example, fighters in a revolution are willing to sacrifice their lives for freedom. So obviously they have an incentive to stay alive. Everybody has an incentive to stay alive, but they are so deeply convinced of their cause and of their ideology that they are willing to actually override that incentive with another incentive. So they have a higher incentive to have the revolution succeed than to stay alive. So in essence, this means that there are overriding incentives. There are certain incentives stronger than others, and those are the ones you are not willing to sacrifice. The other example here is, I may want to get a promotion at my job, but I'm not willing to bribe my boss for it because I think it's immoral. So I have an incentive to get a promotion, but I think morality is more important than getting a promotion. So I'm not going to sacrifice morality. This is something that's a red line for me, and I'm not going to cross it. So to just give a very trivial example, obviously this example will never happen in real life. It's a dumb example, but it just, to make it very clear, what does this mean? So if you are a member of a, let's say, disprivileged ethnic minority in a particular country, you obviously have an incentive to not be discriminated against. This is something that everyone in the group will likely desire. If theoretically you are offered the chance for the government to stop discriminating against your group, but in return the government will kill your family, most people would say no. So even though you have a strong incentive to not be discriminated, most people feel even stronger about retaining the safety of those around them and those who they love, and so on and so forth. So there are always red lines. So this characterization often works very well when we're talking about things like paramilitary groups, terrorist groups, like for example, suicide bombings are a very good example, similar to the fighters in the revolution one, where we have a situation where people are so deeply convinced of their religious goals, so this is their incentive that they're not willing to sacrifice, the fulfillment of the caliphate, if we're talking about ISIS and things like that, to the extent they're actually willing to sacrifice their lives. So the question is, what are actors willing to do and what are they not willing to do to achieve a particular incentive? And this functions as a likelihood analysis, right? So this is where you prove whether or not it's likely that an actor is going to do what you're claiming that they're going to do in a debate. Why is this important? Because in every debate, teams are going to make different and competing claims about what is going to happen. So team A will claim one impact, team B will claim the other opposite impact. The team that wins is probably the team that proves that their impact is the most likely impact in a particular situation. And I think this is a very good question to do that. Question number 3 is, what irrationalities they're affected by? So I think irrationality, which is the best word here, insofar as people are not rational maximizers of utility. And this is also my problem with capitalism, but that's another question. People, when they make decisions, they do not make a perfect cost-benefit calculus. They are affected by their emotions and their beliefs. So people can be afraid, angry, sad, deeply convinced of an ideology or religion, desperate, in love, and all of these things affect our decision-making calculus. So if I am angry, let's say I'm angry at my friend, I will maybe say some things that I don't really mean and I will hurt them. And this is a stupid thing to do, but in a situation where I'm angry, I might do this. If I am desperate, for example, I have no food, I have no money, I may decide to, I don't know, rob a store because I think this is my only option. This is not a smart thing to do. I will get caught by the police and I will end up in jail. But in a situation where I have no other choice, this is something I'm likely to do out of desperation. The examples we talked about in question number 2. So fighters in a revolution or ISIS terrorists, they are deeply convinced of an ideology or religion to that extent that they're willing to do things we would consider irrational. So we definitely would consider being a suicide bomber or going on, a failed mission to establish the Paris Commune or something like that, irrational, because you're probably sacrificing your life and your chances of success are very small. However, if people are so deeply convinced of what they are doing, they will not engage in the rational calculus about that. They will rather follow their emotional state or their beliefs. So note here that all of these 3 questions interact. So the irrationalities that people are affected by also affect how far they are willing to go to get something, depending on their emotional situation. So note that these 3 questions do not exist in a vacuum. They rather interact with each other and amplify or de-amplify each other based on the particular situation and based on the particular example. So those are the questions for incentive analysis. And those 3 questions I think can be used as a template for any actor within any debate to define quite plausibly what they are likely to do and why. However, what's important to understand, as I said at the beginning, is that we have to cross-reference the incentives actors have with the power that they have, i.e., can they fulfill those incentives and how likely they are to do it. To do that, I will introduce you to a concept called the 3 phases of power. So different political scientists and sociologists have developed different theories of power over time. Those 3 congeal into a concept called the 3 phases of power, which in essence describe the 3 types of power that an actor may have and how these types of power work. Again, I've shown the whole slide at the beginning, so you can write things down, you can screenshot it, but I'm going to take you through each and every one of them step by step. So the first type of power is coercive power. In a very, mathematical definition, this is the power of actor A to force actor B to do what actor A wants, even if this is not in the interest of actor A. So this is essentially a mechanism that works through coercion and punishment. So this is a mechanism that allows an actor to force another actor to do something that this actor would otherwise not do, but now they are forced to because they have no choice and they fear the repercussions, they fear the punishment if they don't do this. The most obvious example is the power of a state towards the citizens. So in essence, the state has laws, and if you do not follow these laws, the state has courts, it has the police, it has even in some cases the military, that it can use to force you through the use of coercion, through the use of brute physical force at certain occasions to follow a particular order, even if you may not want to do that. I think another example on the level of violence is, for example, again, terrorist groups who use fear to push countries to give into their demands. So this is something that countries would not want to do. This is not something that's in their interest, but because they are threatened by the repercussions, which is we're going to blow something up if you don't do this, they're coerced into doing this. But coercive power can also exist in interpersonal relationships between ordinary people. So for example, a bully in school has coercive power over a kid that they're bullying, because the bully is going to ask you for, your lunchbox, and if you don't give him that lunchbox, he's going to wedgie you, or he's going to, put your head in the toilet or something like that, because he's stronger than you, and he's able to do that to you, and therefore he can force you to do things for him that you would not otherwise want. So this is in essence the power of an actor to force another actor through the use of power and through the use of potential punishment and sanctions that the actor knows will happen unless they follow the demands that are given to them. The second type of power is agenda setting power.
I'm sorry.
Yeah?
Tim, we can see the slides. Right now we have a slide drill 1, identifying incentives.
That should not be, wait. Can you see the correct slide now?
No? Yes.
Okay, excellent. Sorry for that. Technology doesn't like me and I don't like it. Okay. Second type of power is agenda setting power. So this refers to the power to set focus on certain issues, to determine which issues will be relevant and discussed and which will not. What does this mean? This means the ability to push something into discourse, to drive the public eye towards something, and to exclude certain issues. I think this is best explained through examples. The first example is the power, for example, of the ruling party in parliament to decide the docket. So, for example, in the House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House decides the daily docket, which is which laws are going to be debated and voted on and which are not. A law which doesn't even get debated in parliament is effectively excluded from discourse. So this is, for example, the power to decide which laws are going to be debated and therefore reach the public eye, be subject to discussion and to scrutiny, and which are not. But on a general societal level, another good example is the power of, let's say, a pop star or an actor to direct public attention to an issue. So what does this mean? If I'm running an NGO in Croatia and I want to run an NGO that saves kittens, and I go out onto the main square in Zagreb and I yell, save the kittens, people are going to think this is just some crazy cat guy and they're not going to pay attention to me and nobody's going to care about my kittens. But if I get a famous Croatian singer or a Croatian actor or, an international face, and now I got Scarlett Johansson on the main square in Zagreb saying save the kittens, then this is going to be listened to. Why? Because she has a lot of followers. The media is going to report on this. There are going to be articles about this. So when she speaks out about it, she has agenda setting power, because when Scarlett Johansson says save the kittens, as a famous person, the media is going to report on what she said. They're going to do background research, and the entire world is going to hear that we need to save the kittens. This is why, in, let's say, humanitarian crisis, the voices of famous people are very often very important, because famous individuals, like, for example, when Argentina boycotted Israel in football, so they did not want to go and play friendly with Israel because they supported the Palestinian cause. When Lionel Messi spoke out about that, everyone in the world who loves football read that Lionel Messi spoke about that, and this is how issues reach other people's ears. So people who have the power to direct others' attention to something, to decide, to in some way decide which issues to put focus on and which issues to exclude, have agenda setting power. Governments also have agenda setting power, for example, like politicians, because when politicians speak out about certain issues, when they hold speeches before elections, in campaigns, or simply during their mandate, when they talk about certain things, they're setting focus on particular issues and not setting focus on others by choosing what to speak about. So they have agenda setting power in that way. The third type of power is preference shaping power. And this is potentially the most powerful and most dangerous type. This is the power to willingly shape the preferences of others. In other words, to convince others that they truly want or do not want something. So notably, there is an absence of coercion here. This is the ability to convince another actor that they genuinely, truly, out of their own interest, desire something. So a very good example, and the strongest example, is advertisement, especially today when we have targeted advertisement on social media, which algorithms which collect our preferences. So they collect data about what we click on, how much time we spend on particular types of content, how much we engage, and then they actually they analyze patterns of our behavior that we actually don't even know about, and then they target ads specifically tailored to us. If these ads are successful in making us want to buy something, they have preference shaping power, because we were not coerced to do that. We were not told to do that, in the sense that we're going to have repercussions or there's going to be certain sanctions. We now genuinely desire the product. So when you see a food advert or a beer advert and it sounds so tasty, so this golden beer, and then there's this foam on the glass and it looks so nice and cold and refreshing and stuff like this, when you watch a beer ad and it makes you want that beer, this is preference shaping power, because you were not coerced. You were influenced in a way that your preference has genuinely become something. I think an example outside of advertisement can be religious organizations, right? Because religious officials have a claim to certain holy laws, and to transmit those holy laws to a population. They have a mandate to guide their population towards the will of God or away from the will of God, which means that insofar as they can instrumentalize, let's say, religious discourse and claim that something is religiously mandated and therefore in and of itself virtuous or in and of itself the will of God, they can shape the preferences of their congregation through the instrumentalization of that, because they can make people genuinely want something by making them believe that this is part of, let's say, a larger plan or part of a definition of virtue or morality that people subscribe to. Again, it's important to note, first of all, that these powers can coexist. So actors can have multiple types of power at once. For example, a state or a government, let's take an authoritarian country, like for example, North Korea. North Korea has all three types of power, right? So they have coercive power, like any other state. They can use the police and the military to get citizens to follow laws and to repress them if they don't follow these laws. They have agenda setting power, because, for example, they exclude certain things from political discussion. You are not allowed to criticize the government. We do not discuss, there is no parliamentary debate, so no laws are being debated. So they're essentially excluding public discourse. They have agenda setting power, and they have preference shaping power, because they have propaganda. They have all of those posters and movies about, how the great leader is leading us to glory and things like that. So it's possible to have all three types of power at once, or multiple types of power at once. Second thing to keep in mind is that these types of power very often interact or overlap. For example, coercive power can be used to get agenda setting power. Kidnapping is a very good example of this. So very often, let's say paramilitary groups, pro-independence movements and stuff like this, they take hostages. And then this kidnapping gets reported on, and they essentially use the kidnapping as a platform for their goal. We have kidnapped these hostages because we were forced to by an oppressive government that doesn't want to recognize our right to independence or our sovereignty or our autonomy. And by doing this action, we wanted to show the public that we are ready to do anything to achieve our goal. So this is coercive power, because you have kidnapped a person and you are coercing another actor, for example, a state. You're forcing the state to pay ransom, or you're forcing the state to give you some political concessions so you can return the hostages. But it's also agenda setting power, because you're using this as a platform to speak out about your issues. You are explaining why you are doing this, and you are putting a certain issue within the public discourse. So very often these types of power can overlap, and one type of power can help you achieve another type of power. And the final thing to remember here is that actors have different degrees of this power. So you can have all three types of power, but you can have them to a very low degree. So you have different types of power, but you have very little power in terms of amount. You can have a lot of power. So for example, if we talk about coercive power, we have said that the state has coercive power, and a bully in school has coercive power, but the state is more powerful than a bully. because the state has the police and the military, and the bully has his fist. If the state were to fight the bully, the state would win. So you can have these types of power, but you have them to different degrees and different extents. So when you're characterizing this in debates, it's also important to explain not just what type of power you think an actor has, but to what extent they have this power and how this power manifests. Cool. And this is the moment when we move on to drills. So before we move on to drills, I would like to ask whether everything is clear to everyone. Are there any questions? Feel free to just unmute yourself and ask them if there are.
No questions.
Cool.
Excuse me, can you explain how agenda is working? I mean, they read something about end.
Can you repeat the question? I did not catch that. Can I explain how agenda is what?
Okay, the guy who is famous read something about some actions, and how the people who already knew about it, how they will act, or how agenda is working for solving this problem what is exists.
So in essence, agenda setting power works in a way that you direct the focus of people to a certain issue. So, I mean, obviously, if I don't know, a famous person speaks out about a social issue and I am very informed on this issue and I already know about this, I'm already acting on this because I care about this, this doesn't affect me. But it affects multiple other people who were not aware that something was a problem. For example, they didn't know that there was a humanitarian crisis in, let's say, Yemen, but then a politician or an actor or a religious leader who people trust and who people believe speaks out about this, and they say that we have a moral duty to help the people in Yemen, to donate, to give money. This is something that pushes people towards action. So a good example of this, I think, is during COVID. So this guy who plays for Manchester United, Marcus Rashford, he started an action to deliver meals to people, for example, to elderly people who are not able to leave their homes and things like this. And by doing that, because he was a very famous footballer and people reported on this, and the media reported on this, the issue of a lot of people not being able to access things during lockdown came into the public eye. And this pressured the government to act about this, because once the media started writing about this and about the problems behind it, this means that a lot of people were now aware that the government is not doing its job well, and the government then, in order to repair the damage, had to do something to settle that. So this agenda setting power does not affect everyone in society, but it works in a way to increase awareness of certain issues, but also implicitly it excludes certain issues. Because people who have power, be they governments, be they politicians, be they famous individuals, who choose not to speak about certain issues, they actually exclude them from the public eye and make these issues less likely to be resolved, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Are there any other questions? Right. So we move on to drill number 1. Identifying incentives. So you have a list of potential actors that can show up in debate. So there are 7 of them here. Take 10 minutes to go over the whole list and answer the 3 questions about incentives for each of these actors. So what do they want? How far are they willing to go to get it? And how far are they not? So what are and aren't they willing to sacrifice? And what irrationalities they're affected by? We will discuss this later. So it's going to be an open-ended discussion. We're going to go actor by actor. Everyone can provide their contributions. Please also try to explain why you think your answers are correct. So if you say anti-vaxxers are willing to do this and not willing to do that, try to have an explanation why you're claiming this about them. And lastly, where applicable, define what sorts of power these actors have and why. So which type of power do you think they have and what makes you think that? I'm going to give you 10 minutes. I'm going to turn off my camera and my video, but I will be here for any questions. And after 10 minutes, I will come back and unmute myself and we can start a discussion about these actors. Are there any questions regarding the drill?
Sorry, can you probably show once again slide with questions, like these 3 questions?
Yes. So incentive or power?
Yeah, this one. Thank you. Just make a screenshot.
Yeah, you can screenshot this, and then I can also switch it to Power, and then you can screenshot Power as well. Cool.
Okay, done. Thanks.
And you can screenshot this as well. It helps.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you, Dan.
Okay, I will now turn off the camera and my sound, and I will start timing 10 minutes. Right, so at this point we're going to start, simply to have time to finish the other drill as well. If anyone is not done with the incentive analysis, you can still discuss as we go, obviously, you can still share your ideas. So we're going to start going actor by actor and analyzing the answers to all three questions and to power in terms of what type of power they have. So starting with soldiers of the Islamic State or ISIS, so can anyone tell me what do you think these people want? What are their incentives?
I have some ideas about ISIS.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. First question is what does the actor want? Firstly, ISIS wants to rule the region and expand their influence among their land. And how far are they willing to go to get it? They are ready to interpret the words written in the Quran in order to attract even more people to the side of their rhetoric. And how does it work? They actively recruit through social media people who show an interest in Muslim or radical rhetoric and try to show common goals. Later, they work with a person in a targeted way, learning what a person needs for a good life. For example, they need money to care about their child or, for example, parents, and acts through this level to attract them to their group. And they are willing to sacrifice money to recruit people and people to achieve goals. And third question in second, what are they not willing to do? They don't want to make concessions to their opponents and make compromises. For example, they didn't care about some maybe peaceful methods of working in that place where they situated. And the third question is what irrationalities are they affected by? And if we are talking about the irrationality of people who go to ISIS, firstly, the problem is they love some Islam and that's rhetorics and trying. I can hear myself. Yeah, and possibly to the possibility of recruitment due to blind faith in the truthfulness of words of ISIS, And thirdly, they don't realize that recruitive helps from ISIS fall into a trap from which it will be very difficult to get out because they are easy to manage. And if we talk about ISIS, first, the problem is that they don't want to retract from aggressive rhetoric and intimidation, that they will not be allowed to be successful in any world. The number of victims who suffered because of them will not be forgiven by the states that fight them. So I think that's all.
Okay, so you were talking a lot about how ISIS reinterprets the words in the Quran to suit their needs in their recruitment, and then when they recruit people, they actually provide them with certain things to get them to stay in ISIS. So what kind of power do you think that is? So not just you, I mean anyone.
It's power of social media. Yeah.
Yes, but I mean in terms of the 3 types of power I gave you. So which type of power does it fit into?
Agenda setting power.
Yeah,
why do you think it's agenda setting power?
Like,
excuse me, can you show this slide, please? About agenda.
I think they have the incentive of power, coercive power, because they can I don't know, punish or kill people or make some armed conflicts. I think, yeah. And the second one is the I think preferences. Focus on important things. They can shape those agendas. I don't know who. I think Aidar says because they can shape or attract the attention to some of their causes. They can I don't know, make some terrorist attacks and say we did this because we think that you should make some I don't know, stuff.
Yeah, both of these are correct. So ISIS does have coercive power because they can, through fear, through threatening attacks, they can force countries to give them concessions. They do have agenda setting power because, as you say, they can broadcast their goals and their causes. But I think the example we got earlier about how ISIS reinterprets the Quran, how they actually provide people with food and shelter and lodging, is also preference shaping power, right? Because they make people genuinely want to be in ISIS. They convince them that it is within the Quran, that their goals are within the Quran, that their goals are virtuous and moral. They give people food, they give people money, and so on and so forth, in order to get them to want to stay in ISIS. So this is not coercion. The example we got was therefore preference shaping power, because they also do things that make people genuinely want to be part of that organization. So this is a situation where you have all 3 types of power. And shortly, we got this answer before in a longer form, but I want to make it just very clear. So, what does ISIS not want to sacrifice? What is something that they will never compromise on?
I think the only thing is their basic idea, the idea of I don't know, clear Islam. Yeah. And this is all because they can kill themselves, they can kill other people, they can make all stuff which they can do, yeah, which they have the resources. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. So they are not willing to sacrifice their ideological conviction and therefore their political goals. Notice how this overlaps in between questions 2 and 3. So this is something they're not willing to sacrifice, but it's also a strong irrationality they're affected by because, as you said, they're willing to sacrifice their lives for the cause and things like this. And this is why very often it's incredibly hard to negotiate with terrorists who have incredibly strong religious goals, because negotiation in and of itself is something that is a breach of these religious goals, because you do not negotiate about something that is sacred or holy or something that God gave to you and things like that. Cool. Anti-vaxxers. Answer to question number 1. Let's try to go question by question. What do anti-vaxxers want?
I think their main idea is that they don't want to be vaccinated by themselves and their children. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So they generally push for a ban on vaccines. How far are they willing to go to get it, and what are they not willing to do? What are they not willing to sacrifice?
I think they can be shamed or marginalized or some kind of discriminated by most of people, by the government, by I don't know. They can lose their jobs in some cases, but they can't lose their life. There are some there on field, or I don't know how to say it in English.
Yeah. So generally, because these people believe that vaccines are dangerous to their health, their primary incentive is to retain what they believe to be their health. So yes, you're correct. They are willing to be insulted by other people. They're willing to maybe lose their job. They're willing to not be able to send their child to public school if the child is not vaccinated, depending on the law of a particular country. They're willing to be seen as crazy because they believe that all of this is a fair sacrifice for health. They do not want to sacrifice what they believe to be the health of them and their children. And this obviously overlaps with the type of irrationality they're under. So what is the most obvious irrationality these people are affected by?
I think the main one is that the vaccines are unhealthy or they can harm their life, but also they are the vaccines that are cheap, that there are chips in there, and the government will rule their life or somehow influence on them, and they don't have the they think that government want to kill them or somehow harm them.
Okay, and this emotion, what is this emotion? What are they feeling then?
Fear.
Yes, they are afraid. Their primary irrationality is fear. And I think the examples that were given are very good examples. Because if these people literally believe that Bill Gates is implanting a microchip in you, this is something that sounds horrible, like it's a global conspiracy and things like this, which means that when you're characterizing emotions in debates, don't just tell me that someone is afraid. Do what we've just heard. Give examples. Explain that why this fear or this any irrationality is so strong, so powerful, so overriding. You want to provide characterization behind the irrationalities and behind the incentives that you claim actors have. So what kind of power do we think anti-vaxxers have? Do they have coercive power?
Maybe only on their children's.
Yeah, but apart from that, like, yeah, sure, they have coercive power towards their child to not vaccinate them, but apart from that, they don't have a lot of coercive power. Do they have the other two types of power?
I think only they focus on some things that they think are important because they are speaking that the vaccines are harmful somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, so they have agenda-setting power. Especially, I think this is true if they get individuals who have a lot of social capital to support them. Like, for example, Novak Djokovic, who is the current top tennis player in the world, is an anti-vaxxer. So when he talks about the risks of vaccination, that reaches a lot of people. Do you think they have preference-shaping power?
I think yes. They sometimes can talk to people who are willing to get vaccines and change their opinion, or sometimes they can have something in social media, something like someone was vaccinated, then these people has died, something like this.
Yeah, exactly. They can sometimes be very convincing in their advocacy. They establish links between vaccines and autism, or as you said, vaccines and death. So someone gets vaccinated for COVID, for example, and they die after that, and then they say, obviously, this is proof that the vaccine is dangerous, and similar things. Yes, so they can have preference-shaping power. If their advocacy is successful, they can shift people's opinions from being pro-vaccine to being anti-vaccine without coercion. So yes, they do have preference-shaping power. That's a very good answer. The feminist movement. What does the feminist movement want?
Yeah, can I?
Yeah.
So firstly, what does actor wants? They want equality for women on political, social, and other levels. Secondly, what they are willing to sacrifice, I think, time and money, and the red lines, or what they are not willing to sacrifice, maybe it's their freedom, or most of them I think they don't want to humiliate men. And how far are they willing to go to get it? Surprisingly, it's a hard one. Maybe to go to protests. I don't know.
Yeah.
And third one, what irrationalities are they affected by? I think they could be sad or sometimes angry for like their rights are not being recognized in society.
Okay, so I think in terms of what they are and aren't willing to sacrifice, so I think the answer you gave is freedom. I think it's a fair answer. It's, however, a bit broad and vague. So I think in terms of the context of the feminist movement in particular, what they're never willing to sacrifice, the red line for them is they're not willing to sacrifice what they believe to be the equality for women or emancipation for women. So whatever the feminist movement does, they will never sacrifice women. They will never instrumentalize women because they're fighting for women. I think this is the red line. I think the other answers are very fair. Yes, it's true. So how far are they willing to go to get it? Yes, they go to protests. So this means they spend their time. They maybe risk their jobs. They risk clashing with the police. But despite this, they go to these protests because they believe in the cause. But I think it's important to keep in mind when we're talking about movements, which is why I put this here, is that movements are very often fractured. So there are different parts and different branches of a movement that do not necessarily want the same thing, or even if they do not define it in the same way. So things like choice feminism, lean-in feminism, etc., are different types of feminist thought that very often are not in conjunction with each other and have different interpretations of what female emancipation means. So when you're characterizing movements, keep in mind that movements are never monolithical, but rather they tend to be fractured and nuanced groups of people. But in general, I think the answers were good. Are there any types of power within the feminist movement has? Do they have coercive power?
I think sometimes, not all of them. Maybe if they have seats in the government and they can affect from this level.
But why do you think this is coercion?
Because when they have power in government, they can force other actors to do something, like to provide some laws.
Yeah, so I think the train of thought is fair, but it goes more under agenda setting power because there's no sanction here. They're not using force. They're not punishing anyone. There are no repercussions if you don't vote for the feminists. This is more of agenda setting power because if they are in parliament, they can, as you said, propose certain laws. These laws get discussed. This gets publicized and transmitted on television. This gets reported on by the media, and people discuss this. And feminist issues, which would otherwise not have been represented on the parliament floor, are now represented on the parliament floor. So this is a representation of issues rather than coercion. But so it's just a definitional problem. But yes, you are correct. This is one of the types of power that the feminist movement can exercise. Do they have or can they have preference shaping power?
I'm not sure, but they have a lot of agenda setting power, like Me Too, writing books, sharing agenda with celebrities. But I'm not sure about preference.
Can we imagine a situation where feminists shape someone's preferences?
Yes, I think because they also can they can inform people about the problem of woman, about the problem which the woman found, or about their problem, and then people shape their preference. They think that they should change those laws or those visions about the woman. Yeah.
Correct. So the feminist movement is able to convince people, then it also has preference shaping power. Just to give you a very trivial example of this. So when the feminist movement speaks out about microaggressions, so the way men treat women on a day-to-day basis, not out of malice or out of evil, but because of internalized behaviors that they're not aware of. So for example, that men are more likely to speak over women, that men make certain advances towards women or certain physical contact that women may find uncomfortable. And then the feminist movement says, this is something you're probably also doing to your female friends, and you're not aware of this. If you care about your female friends, you should change your behavior. And then people who genuinely do care about their female friends, because they deeply desire that their female friends are happy, are going to change their behavior. So yes, the feminist women does have preference shaping power, and that's a good answer. Moving on. The ruling party in a democracy, on the most basic level, what do they want?
I think they want to fulfill their agenda, because there can be different agendas on different parties, yeah? So
Okay.
they want to do the stuff that they say to the people that they will do, yeah?
Okay, so they have political incentives to fulfill their ideology. Is there anything else a political party can want? So actors can have multiple incentives, obviously.
I think they want to be re-elected, firstly, and secondly, they want to get support of of people to make their resolutions. So something like they want to do something about one state, something about education or ecology, and people should do these actions because the government or this party cannot do all these things.
Okay, so they want to be in power, they want to get support, be it public support or parliamentary support, and they want to fulfill their political agenda. How far are they willing to go to get it? What will they sacrifice? What will they not?
I think that they can sacrifice, or they can sacrifice I don't know, some of the basis of democracy in some case, but last election showed us that some parties can do this, yeah. Last elections on the world, yeah. But I think they can't lose their voters, yeah. They can't go against the willing of their voters, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So they can do many things, but they are not willing to sacrifice their voters, because sacrificing their voters would mean losing power. This is against the incentive of a ruling party in a democracy. This is correct. Are there any ways in which a party, a ruling party or any other party, can be irrational in making decisions?
I think they can also sacrifice their leaders. For example, if electorate don't like leader A, they can change it to leader B to get more votes.
Yeah, this is also correct. Are there any irrationalities that they can be affected by?
Yeah, they could be afraid of protest, for example.
Okay, they can be afraid of protest. What about ideology? Can they be deeply convinced of an ideology?
Yep.
Yes, well, obviously. So, okay, some parties are not deeply ideological, some parties are deeply ideological. But let's say if you get a deeply ideological party in power, probably the goals of this ideology, the morals of this ideology is going to affect how they make decisions. What type of power does a ruling party in a democracy have?
I think all three kind of powers.
Yeah, why?
Because they can use the power of the state, they can use police and army and all the stuff which country can give you, yeah. They can focus on important things also because they are the leading party, yeah.
Yeah.
And they can set the agenda on the parliament or whatever they do the laws, yeah. Also in the on the social part, yeah, they can give money to the television or to the media to set some questions on agenda, yeah. And also they can shape the preferences because they can say they can choose some laws, yeah.
Yes. So yeah, so they have all three types of power because they actually control the state. So this is a situation where actors can have all three types of power simultaneously. Okay, moving on. Catholic Church, what do they want?
Excuse me, may I ask a questions about previous things?
Yes.
Can you explain how they can use the judicial power? I didn't get it.
Judicial power. So
Yeah.
Not sure. Okay, so if it's a democracy, I'm not sure that they can use judicial power because the judiciary is probably relatively independent, but they have legislative power because they're the ruling party in the parliament. So this means they have the most seats. They can propose laws. They can pass those laws. So they can directly influence people's lives through doing that, which is both coercive power in terms of being able to use the police to enforce those laws and agenda setting power in terms of deciding what is going to be debated, and also through the executive they get to implement this. And also by being the ruling party, they have most of a platform. So they have like the largest amount of propaganda, they have the largest amount of time to speak and stuff like this, which means that if they are successful in convincing their voters, they also have preference shaping power. I mean, probably they have already had preference shaping power a priori because they were able to convince the majority of voters to vote for them. So obviously they were successful in that advocacy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Catholic Church. What does the Catholic Church want?
I think they want to maintain a role of religion in society. It's like to provide some rituals, celebrations, and support reputation of church.
Okay, so they want to maintain the reputation and the role of the church. What do they want in terms of, believers?
I'd say that they want to attract more people to the religion to save more like eternal souls.
Yes, so they want to get more believers, and you are correct. There is both a material incentive here, just in terms of the more believers you have, the stronger you are, politically, economically. And there is also this metaphysical incentive, which is the salvation of the soul. When people believe the correct religion, from your perspective, the correct religion, then they're also on the path to salvation. That's true. So what about the things that they're willing to do? What about the red lines?
I think the red lines are mostly caused by their views. They believing actually, because in any religion there are things that you can do and there are things that you can't do. Yeah. Also, there are the things that in the society are spreading, so they can't go against the, I don't know. For some case they can. I think that there can be some ideas in a society against what the church can go, but I think this is slightly because something like gays a few years ago, when that was I don't know, an idea that the gays should have the equal rights, yeah. But the church go against this, yeah?
Yeah, so you're correct. Most of the things they're not willing to cross are related to religious laws. There are issues that the Catholic Church will never compromise on. For example, abortion. Like, I cannot see a situation in which the Catholic Church would be willing to allow abortion or be willing to concede on abortion. So given that they have strong religious views and that these are very often dogmatic, so you cannot negotiate on them, they have incredibly strong red lines. And you already see how this is going to overlap with the answer to question number 3, because obviously the rationalities they're affected by are the strength of the views in terms of the religion, which means that given their conviction into the religion, they are literally the emissaries of Christ on earth. This means that the things that are religious rules, religious codes that they feel strongly about are not something that they're ever going to compromise on or negotiate on. What kind of power do they have? Do they have coercive power?
They have coercive power, but only towards their priests. For example, they have own court, and they can punish their priests for crimes what they make.
Okay,
I think they also.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think they also have the coercive power to all of them, all the people who believe in this, because they can say that you will go to hell if you don't do the thing that we want, yeah?
Yeah.
That God wants.
Both are correct. I think the first case is a more direct case. So there's direct punishment. The second is punishment by proxy. So God is going to send you to hell if you don't do this. But yes, both of these are coercion in one way or another. What about the other two types of power?
I think the church have some kind of authority, especially the Pope, and this is an example of preference shaping, because Pope can say you should do something, you should do X, and since they have this authority power, the people will listen to them, to him.
On the same logic, so the Pope can speak out about things, and the Pope is very influential because believers listen to him because he's the 13th apostle or whatever.
Can you repeat, please, because we can't hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Maybe it's problem when in parallel someone to open mic and your voice is just not so loud. Сергей, можешь выключить, пожалуйста, микрофон? Кажется, это влияет. Yeah, can go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay, so on the same logic that we heard now, which is the Pope is very influential, he has influence over his believers, believers listen to the Pope, can he also have agenda setting power then?
Yeah, I think yes, because there were examples where he for example say that gay marriage is not something which go against religion, and he support that. I think it has some influence, but not for all believers, but for the part, like liberal part of believers.
Yes, definitely. And also religious leaders can simply put issues in focus or shut them down. So if the Pope says there is this very important, organization or this very important, humanitarian crisis, you as believers should donate money, a lot of people would do that because he is the Pope, and that's something he's saying as a religious leader. So this is agenda setting power in a positive way. But also if he says, within religion, we are not allowed to discuss the issue of abortion. This is something that is banned and we're not going to discuss this. He is shutting an issue off of the agenda. A lot of people who believe in the Catholic Church are not going to participate in this discussion a priori because they were told by their leader not to. So yes, they can also have agenda setting power in that sense.
Actually, we have a second point about some leaders like Lionel Messi. When he scores goal, he prays to the sky. And of course, having been an Argentinian person, I will understand why do it. And when I'm scoring goal in the streets, I also try to be like he. And if he will use some rhetoric like abortion is bad or something like that, I will say also like him, because it's terrible. Lionel Messi said, and after that I will try to influence other people, my family, other stuff like that.
Yes, you're completely correct. So this is again a form of both agenda setting power and preference shaping power, insofar as Lionel Messi has the influence and the ability to convince people of other things and to raise certain issues. You're completely correct. Labor unions. What do labor unions want?
I have a question related to the church.
Yes.
For example, if the church have its own budget, which it uses, for example, for charity, what kind of power, which kind of power of those of free, or it's not a power?
So I think money is a tool that can be used for all three types of power. I think probably in the case of the church, it's most likely agenda setting power and preference shaping power, because the church can spend money on things it considers to be important and therefore develop, so if they're spending money on charities, this is something that, so these charities then have, more advertisements, they have more projects, they have more programs. So through spending money on charities, the church is able to put the issue of charity on an agenda. but also very often they spend this budget on proselytization. So to have efficient religious education, to have sermons, to have priests who are going to be very liked in the community and who are going to retain believers or get new believers. So it's also preference shaping power. So money is a tool that can be used for all three types of power depending on who you are as an actor. Okay. Labor unions. What do labor unions want?
Protection of interests.
Okay, of whose interests?
Workers or some people's, yeah. Against maybe governments or companies to save some.
So represent workers against both employers and governments. True. What tools do they use? What will they do to get it? What are they not willing to sacrifice?
They can use strikes.
Okay. What else do they do?
Will they negotiate, I guess?
Maybe
negotiate.
Most of the time.
Okay. So strikes, negotiations, cool. So they're obviously willing to devote a lot of time, resources, and even risk personal safety, because they can lose their jobs if they go on strike, or they can get their wages cut, or they can clash with the police if they protest. So they obviously do it because of something they're really convinced of. So what will they not sacrifice?
Actually, I'm sorry, they also use some status quo, for example, coronavirus in their rhetorics, and after that get some points about why it's really important.
Yeah,
that's why we should. Yeah.
They also instrumentalize the status quo. That's true. So why do they do this? What are they not willing to sacrifice?
I think
well, on the other hand, they do not want to sacrifice labor rights, I guess. But on the other hand, I do not believe that like labor unions will behave the way after that all the people will be fired at this company. So they also sacrifice the exact workers they defeat.
Okay, yeah. So I think in terms of the question I was asked, what you said first is the answer. So they will not sacrifice worker rights in a broad level. I would just say, secondly, they probably do not want to sacrifice the support of their members, right? So labor unions are only as strong as the amount of members they have and the amount of money these people pull into the common budget. So they're probably not willing to sacrifice their members, which is why this incentive overrides the other incentives. So they're willing to strike, they're willing to protest, they're willing to do anything to retain the support of their members. So what irrationalities can they be affected by?
I think there are slightly balance between work and capital, and they can lose this this balance because they are trying to get more rights to the workers, and they can do something like a world in which there are no capital, so there are no possibilities to workers properly work. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but what in which way can they be irrational? So what irrationalities can they be affected by?
Well, maybe some of the people have a prejudice that all the capitalists are bad guys that want to make harm for all other people.
Yeah, they can have prejudice. I think they can also be desperate. They can be angry. They can be afraid because there's a new government bill that's going to take away their wages. So anything that generally applies to, protest movements and social movements. What type of power do they have?
They also try to live in some socialism in the world of capitalism, and this idea cannot work in their case, maybe.
Yes, but I'm asking about the types of power that they have. So do they have coercive power, agenda setting power, preference shaping power? What type of power do they have? Do they have all three? Do they have none?
Maybe they have agenda setting power because they focus on something like unfair payment of workers, something like this.
Yes, and then this gets into the public eye and they can raise this issue. True, they have agenda setting power. Any other type of power?
Conventive also.
Yes, true. Why? How does this manifest?
I think they have all three types of power. The power of coercive power, because they can do something like protests, or I don't know, they can go to work. Yeah, they can say to all them people, don't go to work, and they wouldn't. So this is the coercive power to those companies, to the government. The focus agenda setting was said, and the preferences, they also can say to the people that you can work and take more money, and the people will get it, yeah, because they understand that this is more possibilities to them.
Yeah, so coercive power, they can obviously blockade the economy, because if they strike in strategic sectors, this affects the state budget incredibly negatively, and they can coerce the state to give them concessions. As we said, they have agenda setting power because they can raise certain issues. If they can convince their members of certain causes, it's also preference shaping power. So yes, you're correct. Labor unions can have all three. And lastly, a transnational corporation. What does a transnational corporation want?
Make more money in each sector.
Okay, cool. So in general profit. How far are they willing to go to get it?
They can work with. Okay.
Go. Haidar.
Okay. They actually can work with governments. They also can work with some other corporations, with people, local people. Yes, to find some authorities. For example, if you work in Argentina, you should work with Lionel Messi, because he is like God, and it's like some advertisement work for them.
Okay. Are they also sometimes willing to sacrifice people's lives and safety?
I think in the country.
Yes.
Alexander.
Yes, they can. Yes, they can corrupt the government, and they can exploit the child labor.
Yeah. So what was the other answer that also began?
I think they can. Exploit all kind of power in which the country in which they are properly can afford them, because in a developed country they can have laws which properly work, and they can't they can abuse some laws, yeah. But in a developing country, they have money they can give to some good lawyers and or good or judges and or government to set the agenda, to change the laws, to if there are laws which were corrupted on their work, they can pay money to the judge or to or to lawyers.
Yeah, so in essence, they can abuse laws, they can corrupt governments, they can exploit labor, they use child labor. So obviously the incentive of profit is very strong. And this is again where I'm emphasizing that you should characterize how strong these incentives are. So corporations want profit so much that they're willing to sacrifice people's lives. So obviously a very huge incentive for them.
I'm sorry, microphone, Sergey, please.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Can they be affected by some irrationalities?
They can don't care about the ecology or about some human.
Okay, the reason they do this is probably out of greed. So we can say that greed can be an irrationality for corporations. What type of power do they have?
Actually, two of them. For example, coercive power. How it works? Firstly, it's can be, if you are Apple, for governments, it's really good to be involved in that company. For example, in Poland, of course, it's good to have Google, because if you have Google, lots of people trying to migrate in that country, and for example, it can be university, it can be just work, and Google can work with government, some like power. They can say that we have lots of power against you, and you should work with us, and just work with some laws or something like that. And secondly, agenda, because they can hire lots of celebrities and just give some give to people some advertisements, and after that, of course, your mindset can be changed. For example, Apple, yes, and all people know that Apple some quality, and if for example Cristiano Ronaldo will use it, all people buy this stuff, for example iPhones or iPads, and something like that.
Yeah, so both are correct. So coercive, because they can threaten governments, they can say we're going to leave, or we're going to relocate to another country, you're going to lose our capital. They have agenda setting power in the ways you described, but can they also have preference shaping power? I mean, I think we literally used that example earlier.
I think yes. For example, McDonald's, they when they come to Africa, they change the habits of people, how they prefer to eat, how they prefer to work. I mean, if there is a fast food company, they tend to establish a narrative when you are trying to eat as much as fast as possible and as much as possible. I think.
And what is the primary way in which they do this? We use this example when explaining incentives.
I think the primary is they can pay to the governments or to the I don't know, to the parliament to set their laws, yeah, to change the laws.
Yes, you know, the example I was referring to is advertisement. They have advertisement. So this is the example we used earlier. So they have preference shaping power, because if their advertisement is successful, and this is how, so the McDonald's example, that's how it works, right? Because McDonald's has very good advertising campaigns. McDonald's has very good advertising experts. And then through this, they can reach the impact which you mentioned, which is the change in people's habits. So the primary way in which corporations do this is having an advertisement which is incredibly complex and incredibly nuanced. Cool. That's the end of drill 1. For the end, we're going to have drill 2. Here's how it's going to look. We will watch the member of government and member of opposition speeches of a debate on the motion this House believes that governments should abandon the strategy of decapitation in fighting terrorism, where decapitation refers to the strategy of targeting terrorist leaders for assassination. So, for example, the attack on Osama bin Laden to stop Al-Qaeda was an example of decapitation. Take note of the stakeholders which speakers identify and how they describe their incentives, as well as to which questions about incentives and power this corresponds. We will not pause after each speech. We will watch the 2 speeches in conjunction because of time constraints, and then we will comment on both of them afterwards. Notice that they will not answer these questions explicitly. So they will not say, okay, here's what the actor is willing to sacrifice, or here is their irrationality. They will do this implicitly, but the way that they analyze stakeholders and analyze incentives will implicitly answer these questions. So take note of which stakeholders they mention and how they characterize their incentives and how they characterize their power. Watch both of the speeches, and then we will have around 10 minutes to comment. So the original end of this lecture was supposed to be 11, so exactly on the hour. We're going to end at like 5 past the hour. The easiest way to do this, because I hate technology and I'm probably going to screw something up if I try to stream the debate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you the link to the debate on YouTube, and you can watch the 2 speeches in conjunction. And then when you're done, just send a message to the chat. Everyone should be done at approximately the same time, because it's 14 minutes of speeches. Give me a second. I'm just going to find where the speeches start. Okay, I'll be sending the link now in the chat. Starting at 37:33. I'm typing it in the chat as well. So watch both member of government and the member of opposition. That takes 14 minutes. When you're done, write in the chat. We're going to discuss for 10 minutes and then you guys are free. I'm going to turn off my camera and my microphone now. You guys are free. So starting with the member of government, a very important part of their analysis on why you're more likely to get negotiations was premised on one particular type of power that they claim that leaders have over their members. What is this type of power?
Legitimacy.
I mean, in terms of the categories I gave you. So which one of the three types of power? So remember, he used the IRA example. He said, what would have happened if Jerry Adams wasn't there?
Yeah, I think this is the preferences shaping power because they can set the agenda. They are persuasive. Yeah.
Exactly. It's preference shaping power. Because his argument is, because these leaders are very influential, they can convince their members that it's in their best interest to negotiate. He said, if Jerry Adams wasn't there, we wouldn't have had the Good Friday Agreement because nobody would have been able to convince the IRA that this is actually something that's good for them and good for the Irish cause. What does he say? So when these groups don't have leaders and they splinter, what does he say? What's the difference in between splintered groups and unified groups? Splintered groups are more what? So in essence, he said that splinter groups tend to be more radical than the original group. Why does that happen? Even if you haven't heard it in the speech. So is there a general reason why you could imagine that the splinter group is more radical than the original group?
What means splintered group? I'm sorry.
So it means that it's split off from the original group. So he said, for example, he used the example of ISIS. He said you had Al-Qaeda, and then ISIS split off from Al-Qaeda because Al-Qaeda considered them too radical.
Because they are trying to emulate the core group, trying to be next Al-Qaeda, for example, and to be more powerful than Al-Qaeda, if we talk about ISIS, for example.
Okay, so this corresponds to an incentive, which is an incentive to retain power. Can we conclude that these new groups are also more irrational? And what kind of irrationality? So if they are trying to be the new Al-Qaeda, as you say, in what way are they irrational?
I think they are more dogmatic.
Yes, they are more
centered to the Quran, or I don't know.
Yes, they are more dogmatic. So in this case, he used irrationality analysis to prove the comparative. He said, so to rephrase what he said, because he did not use these explicit words, he said, leaders have preference shaping power to convince their people to negotiate. This preference shaping power reduces their irrationality. Leaders are more likely to push for rational decisions. If we do not have this preference shaping power, then the irrationalities suppressed by the leaders are going to come out on top, and they're going to affect how these groups behave. So he used both power and incentive analysis to prove his comparative. What did he say about leaders not coming to the table? So when we use decapitation, they will not come to negotiate with us. Why?
Because they're afraid to be killed?
Yes, they're afraid to be killed. So this corresponds to what? So in the terms of the three incentive questions, this proves that they're not willing to do what?
Make negotiations.
Yeah, so their incentive to stay alive is larger than their incentive to negotiate. And this situation where we have overriding incentives. So this is when I explain to you, okay, people can want two things simultaneously, but if they want one more than the other, then the other is not going to happen. And because of this fear, because it's very existential, and this is also, you see where the questions overlap. Fear is an irrationality. This irrationality affects their incentive, which is to stay alive, which is why they won't negotiate. What does closing opposition, and this is what we're going to finish with, what does closing opposition say to this? Why do they actually have an incentive to negotiate now? What are we going to offer to people who negotiate? He says this explicitly.
Oh, I think there was like, you shouldn't kill all, but you can give the immunity to those people.
Yes, that's what he said. He said you can give them protection. So he said, in fact, now they have more of an incentive to negotiate because we will tell them, if you negotiate, we will not kill you. So he flipped the incentive coming from CG. He used the same incentives, but he flipped the way they work. He said, yes, I agree. The incentive to not die is bigger than any other incentive. But we can then use this incentive, we can manipulate this incentive, because we know they're afraid, they will negotiate if we promise not to kill them. So this is how you can utilize incentives of actors to make them do what you want to do. Because if you know what their incentives are and you have power, you can manipulate them into doing the things that are useful for you. Debating is in general a social experiment. You take a person or you take a group of people and you take a motion and you do the motion to them. And then you look as if they were, lab rats and things, what is going to happen to them, and you imagine this alternative world. Now, he said, as you said, the strategy was we do not have to kill all the leaders. So we can use decapitation only when it's smart, and when it's stupid, we're not going to use this. But this is not a policy motion. So he has to prove why this is likely. Why are we likely to use decapitation only when it's smart? And he flagged this explicitly. At the end of his speech, he said, here's why governments have an incentive to use this in a smart way. What did he say here? What is going to happen if we use this too much or if we use this badly? He used the example of Israel, I think. What is Hamas going to do? He said Hamas will retaliate. If we use this too much, then the terrorists are going to respond. And they're going to attack our people, they're going to kill our civilians. What incentives are at play here? So identify the incentives.
They begin more aggression.
Yes, but what's the incentive of the state here?
I think that the intention of their intention is to protect themselves. Yeah, to do, like, say, if you kill all our people, we will kill your.
Yes, this is true of the terrorists. I'm asking about the state. So he says the state will not use this too much because they fear response from the terrorists. What incentive of the state is behind this? The state doesn't want to sacrifice what?
People's wife.
The people.
Their people, exactly. Because the state has an incentive to not sacrifice the people, the state is going to be smart in using this because they know that if they use this too much, their people are going to die, and then their incentive to protect their people is not going to be fulfilled. So again, you see how the speaker used the analysis of the red line, something that people are not going to sacrifice. He used this to explain why he thinks that the outcome of the debate, the outcome of proposing the motion, is going to be what he claims it is going to be. So again, although he did not explicitly answer the questions I gave you, because it's a top class debate and he did not use the template, but both of these speakers actually utilized incentive analysis and power analysis to show that what they're claiming is more likely. This is important because in top debates, all teams are going to make sensible arguments. The team that wins is the team that proves that their arguments are more likely. And this debate was aimed to demonstrate to you guys how this is actually used in debates and how speakers utilize this. I recommend to you guys, and this is what we're finishing with, in your free time, watch the whole debate. So closing half is a lot better than opening half. That's why I gave you MG and MO. But the government whip and the opposition whip are also fantastic. So I think the closing half debate is one of the debates I always show at trainings. It's a fantastic debate. So watch the whole debate. I think it's going to be very useful for you guys, both in terms of content and strategy, but also in terms of doing incentive analysis and things like that. So in essence, that's it for me. Before we finish, I'm just going to ask if you guys have any questions.
Nope, thank you.
No.
Okay. If there are no, yeah, Artem, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you again for doing the workshop, and I think it was very cool. I popped in for some moments, but was also controlling other ones. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no worries at all. So if there are no questions, I'm going to leave now. If anyone has any follow-up questions, you can find me on Facebook. So my name is the one you see here. Feel free to message me at any point, and I hope this was useful to everyone. So,
Thank
bye.
you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.